Mm.
Before we get into that, big news happened in the past couple days. Nick Nurse, former NBA champion, former NBA coach of the year, is out as the Raptors coach. So I think I heard Ime Udoka is like it's not really like fully clear, but it's looking like he's kind of the front runner for that. But before,
Yeah,
Ruben, what are your overall thoughts on it? And how you think Nick Nurse fits with the Rockets?
that's a lot to unpack, right?
Mm,
So I'll take a step back and say I think Nick Nurse came in at the time that he was perfect for. He was a tactician on the defensive end, on the offensive end. I think what he did for the style of play when Kawhi came, I think he was perfect for that championship team. He had some fun seasons. The Raptors overachieved last year. I think 2020 they had a really valid and solid title defense. Um, and then the Tampa year, everyone's kind of like, yeah, that's like an asterisk year. And then obviously this year they struggled. So looking back at this year, Nick Nurse getting fired or getting let go, however way you want to say it, I think the language was really interesting when they said they fired him. First of all, um, but this season has been a lot for Raptors fans, and I'll try and keep it as short as possible. Roster construction, a problem. I think player usage and management, a problem. I think contracts, it's also an issue because that plays to selfishness, that plays to player management and player roles. I also think overutilization, like the fact that Siakam and Fred are leading the league in minutes this year. I think he led the league in minutes this year, if I'm not mistaken. Some insane stat. Like, remember when we used to see jokes about Tom Thibodeau being the guy that would run his players into the ground?
oh yeah, Nick
Nick
Nurse
Nurse
is
is pretty
kind of
much that guy.
yeah. I mean,
And
quick little aside, it's crazy to see how the
yeah,
Knicks have been like actually having a solid rotation rather than running their guys into the ground.
and that's probably just Tom Thibodeau learning over time. And there were some issues with that this year, in fact, like with Quentin Grimes and Emmanuel quickly not getting the opportunity that they should be getting. Um, and then you look down the road, Emmanuel quickly is one of the finalists for Six Man of the Year. But that aside, it's like this team really underachieved, and I wouldn't say all of it is to blame on Nick Nurse. I think Masai and Bobby Webster were washed this year. I think they're absolutely cooked this year. I think the Yak trade was good. I think it was just a year too late. But I will break down and say the Yak trade is good in the future if he resigns, because then instead of a draft pick for 4 years where you're developing, you get a win now player who's still on the younger side ish for a longer term deal. So and he's a proven commodity. So that's a little bit different. I think I'd like to look at it that way. And Masai said in his presser that there's ways to build your team, but when it comes to Nick Nurse, I think the style of play was a problem all year long. Within the first 20 games, it was pretty obvious that the chaos defensive scheme that they like to play did not work anymore. And then on offense, free flowing offense, when you don't have an elite talent, Pascal Siakam is an elite player, but he's not a top five, top 10 elite talent. Like, that's just not what he is. He's a number two guy in the championship team, and that's proven, but he can't be a number one. And so that's the issue is guys are pegging up where they shouldn't be. And when you play a free flowing offense, guys are getting shots that quite frankly shouldn't be getting. And that oftentimes leads to very predictable offense. They were mismatch hunting. Um, you can get into the nitty gritty, but again, from a coaching perspective, I don't think Nick Nurse did his due diligence this year with what he had. Um, so I think him being let go is a good thing. I think his voice was tired. I mean, there's leaks now, dude. Like, there's leaks coming out. Like, Earl Watson missed a game this year on the bench, and a leak came out saying Earl Watson and or that coach who was missing on the bench had a an intense conversation with Nick Nurse that led to Masai Ujiri having to mend things over. But apparently, since that moment, the coaching staff had been tense. They'd had tension the entire year. So sometimes it's just time to move on. And I think that was the best way I can describe Nick Nurse's very up and down year. In terms of the Rockets, I don't think he's a good fit there. Only because I just don't think he's that patient kind of guy for a development year. I don't think that I think he's a coach that's really good in putting in the pieces where uh making sure the style of play is fit around the players in terms of like if you have an elite talent, I think he could game plan around that. Um, but given what he's had this year, I don't think he can do that, and I just don't think that he's the kind of character that will be willing to deal with losing players.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, a
I
lot
think
to unpack.
he's not necessarily like, I wouldn't say a culture setter, but I think more so it's kind of like how you alluded to when he came to the Raptors, where there's the foundation, but he's the one that really hammers it home. But versus when you look at the Rockets, there's not really a foundation there at all. It's still very
Yeah,
raw.
exactly. And I think like a coach there that would work is someone like a Mike Brown. He's a guy's
Mm,
voice that carries a lot of weight.
yeah.
Versus Nick Nurse, who I would genuinely think is one of the better tacticians in the league. But I don't know if he's necessarily, after the 5 years that we've seen in leadership role, aside from the first year, is I don't know if his voice is a voice where you say, yeah, man, like, that's a figure. Like that's a mentor figure. That's, you know, uh, and from what I've seen, like again, the foundation is laid in Toronto, and even that, like, that was very difficult for him to mend and bubble those relationships, and that's what makes guys great like Pop. That's what makes guys like Kerr great. That's what made Sacramento this year great with Mike Brown. Like voice holds such an important piece in the locker room, and if you're kind of, I think Nick Nurse is really good for that. But would you sit here and say like, oh, is he going to be like a mentor figure to me? Like, probably not. So
100%.
I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to take a job right away, or do you think he takes like a year break?
I think he takes a break. I mean, he
Mm.
talked about it like he wants to think and reflect on like the past 10 years he's been with the organization. I'll be surprised actually if he takes a job right away because there aren't any openings. It's Detroit, Toronto, and Houston.
Yeah, it's
I
nothing
just don't know
crazy,
what he
I'd
wants to,
say.
and I highly doubt he's gonna go to Detroit to work under Dwayne Casey.
Oh, no, no, no. No,
He's
that's
definitely not.
that's
He's not doing that. Um, I know you asked this Imi Udoka. I think Imi Udoka is overrated. I've had a chance to really think about it. I mean, Joe Mazzulla, I'm sure he's a really great coach, but like, is that a fluke then that they're really good, or is it simply because of the fact that they've got the great roster that they do, and Jason
Mm.
Tatum as their leader, and Jalen Brown as a secondary piece, and Marcus Smart as a culture setter? Do they have that foundation, and Joe Mazzulla and Ime Udoka are the beneficiaries, like a Nick Nurse, to step into a role such as that? So, and plus all the sexual harassment stuff, like I just don't know if that's a party worth enjoying. Because I don't know if the benefit is going to be there as much as the guy. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
think Imi Udoka is the right guy, but I'm sure the Nigerian connection, the Nigeria team connection, is something important to Masai. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but
yeah,
man, it's an unclear future, but there's a future for sure. I mean, when you look at mock drafts, I think all the ones I've seen has you guys mock to take. I don't know if you looked into it yet. Jalen Hood Shafino,
yeah,
super solid guard, and I think that's something you guys definitely need. So the offseason, I think is definitely going to be, if there's any team that I think has a lot of noise coming in, it's definitely going to be
Toronto.
Toronto. Yeah,
Yeah, agreed. A
but
lot of assets.
for sure.